Now we know how Hitler did it. I was just amazed this morning. I was, while Louise and I were putting the show together, we were watching, we had Morning Joe on the TV, and he literally was saying Trump is like a Nazi, and he's following Hitler's playbook. And I turned to Louise and I was like, remember 5 years ago when you and I were saying this and Joe was blowing it off? It's like how quickly they figure it out. And it's because it's true. I mean, the Nazis in America are now out. They're they're showing up with DeSantis for president and swastika signs. They're showing up at Trump events with their swastikas. They're advertising. The richest man in the world, arguably, certainly in America, Elon Musk, he's retweeting anti-Semitism. Right-wing influencers are blaming Jews and liberals for the Great Replacement theory that Jews want to replace black people with Hispanics or white people with black people, as the case may be, depending on who they're pitching their Great Replacement theory at. The entire Republican Party is embracing candidates who are encouraging hate. So are there actual parallels between the MAGA takeover of the GOP and the Nazi takeover of the German right in the 1930s? Well, both began with national humiliations. Germany was, lost World War I. We lost Afghanistan and Iraq, two wars that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney lied us into as part of their 2004 wartime president re-election strategy. It had worked well for Nixon in Vietnam in '72. It worked well for Reagan with Grenada in 1984. So, they were just following along. Didn't work out so well with George Herbert Walker Bush in '92, but he tried. They all tried. Hitler fought in World War I and then blamed that defeat on the Jews and on the liberals. Trump had cheered on Bush's invasion of Iraq, but later lied about it and claimed that he opposed it. Both had economic crises. In Hitler's case, it was the Republican Great Depression gone worldwide, compounded by the Treaty of Versailles. In Trump's case, it was 40 years of neoliberal policies, Reaganomics, having gutted the American middle class, taking us from 2/3 of us down to about 43% of us. And, Hitler had a slogan, make Germany great again. Well, it wasn't so much a slogan, it was a promise. Trump actually turned it into a slogan, make America great again, although he stole that from Ronald Reagan, but nonetheless. Who stole it from Hitler, I'm guessing. Both tried to overthrow their governments by violence and failed. Hitler with his beer hall, gig, and Trump with January 6th. And then both decided they would try to overthrow their governments using legal means. Hitler promised, and these are actual quotes, I will get rid of the communist vermin. I will take care of the enemy within. Jews and migrants are poisoning Aryan blood. And one people, one nation, one leader. Trump's scapegoats were blacks, Muslims, immigrants, and liberals, and he said he will, quote, root out communists and radical left thugs that live like vermin. He said he would destroy, quote, the threat from within. He said migrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. And he said that under Trump's leadership, America will become one people, one family, one glorious nation. Hitler called the press the Lügenpresse, or the lying press. Trump called the press the enemy of the people, quoting Joseph Stalin. Both exploited religion and religious believers. Hitler proclaimed a new Christianity for Germany and encouraged fundamentalism. Every member of the German army had a belt buckle inscribed with Gott mit uns, God is with us, on its belt buckle. Trump, embraced right-wing Christianity, both Protestant and hardcore right-wing Catholic. Trump made alliances with other autocrats, Mussolini, Franco, Tojo. Trump made alliances with MBS and Putin and Kim. Both Hitler and Trump had inciting incidents that became the touchstones for their rise to illegitimate levels of power. For Hitler, it was the burning of the Reichstaggebäude, the Parliament building. For Trump, it was the claiming that the 2020 election was stolen and then the martyrdom of his supporters in their attempted coup on January 6th. Hitler embraced Bavarian street gangs and brawlers and organized them into the brown shirts. Trump embraces right-wing militia groups and motorcycle gangs and implicitly praises his followers when they do things like attacking Paul Pelosi or election workers or prosecutors and judges. While Trump has mostly directed his hate toward racial and religious minorities, behind the scenes, he and his administration worked hand in glove with anti-gay fanatics like Mike Johnson to limit the rights of the gay community. His administration opposed the Equality Act, saying it would, quote, undermine parental and conscience rights. More than a third of his, 36% of his judicial nominees had previously expressed, quote, bias and bigotry toward queer people, end quote. His administration filed briefs in the landmark Bostock case before the Supreme Court, claiming that civil rights laws don't protect LGBTQ people at all. His Health and Human Services Department ended Obama-era medical protections for queer people. His Secretary of Education, billionaire Betsy DeVos, took apart regulations protecting transgender kids in public schools. His HUD Secretary, Ben Carson, proposed new rules allowing shelters to turn away homeless queer people at a time when 1 in 5 homeless youth identify as LGBTQ+. You know, Pastor Niemöller's famous poem begins with, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist." But in fact, the first group that Hitler came for, within 2 weeks of his becoming chancellor, was the queer community in general, or gay people. The Institute for Sexual Research in Berlin was world known. They did the first gender-affirming surgery in 1930, the world's first. Its director, Magnus Hirschfeld, had compiled the largest library of books and scientific papers on the whole LGBTQ spectrum. And 3 weeks into the Third Reich, that was where they went. There was this long, moribund German law, paragraph 175, that outlawed homosexuality, just like the Comstock Act here outlaws, sending birth control pills through the mail. And it had been largely ignored, and Hitler brought it to power. And a mere 5 months after he came to power, on May 6, 1933, his Nazis showed up at the institution. They hauled over 20,000 books and manuscripts about gender and sexuality out to the streets to burn, creating a massive bonfire. It was the first Nazi book burning and was celebrated with newsreels played in theaters across the nation. And it wouldn't be the last. Soon this spread to libraries and public high schools. The conservative elite of Germany, particularly Fritz Thyssen, Helmar Schacht, and Gustav Krupp, were early supporters of Hitler, as he promised to crush the German labor movement and cut their taxes. Here, without the support of right-wing billionaires funding Cambridge Analytica and Trump's campaign, he never would have won the Electoral College in 2016. Hitler couldn't have risen to power without the support of the largest outlets in German media. Some treated him as just another politician, normalizing his fascist rhetoric. Others openly supported him. After his failed, beer hall putsch in 1930, he was legally banned, or in the 20s, he was legally banned from speaking. But in 1930, Alfred Hugenberg, a German media mogul and right-wing billionaire, took Hitler under his wing. He owned two of the largest newspapers and had several radio stations in Germany, and just like the Murdoch Empire, promoting Donald Trump. Hitler's first major seizure of dictatorial power was his use of the Weimar Law, Article 48. It was the equivalent of the Insurrection Act. It allowed him to suspend habeas corpus, suspend due process, arrest people and hold them without charges. Trump has promised that when he gets into office, he's going to declare a state of emergency and he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act and do exactly the same thing that Hitler did. Once Hitler had seized full control of the German government, he set about changing the laws to replace democracy with autocracy. The Enabling Act allowed Hitler's cabinet to write laws going around Parliament. Trump promises that he's going to use unitary executive powers to do the exact same thing. Hitler also gutted the professional civil service in Germany in its first year. Trump has his Schedule F thing that will gut the American civil service. Hitler replaced judges that were non-compliant with Nazi laws and principles. Trump has come out and said that he wants to do away with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals because they're too liberal. And Trump packed the Supreme Court, right? And it goes on and on. I mean, the Tommy Tuberville was there, in Trump in the Trump Hotel the night before January 6th, helping plot the coup, and now he's holding the top ranks of the military open for Trump to fill. It's just like Hitler did. He replaced all the top ranks of the military when he first came into power. I mean, and now the New York Times reports that Trump is planning to, quote, build huge camps to detain people, and to get around any refusal by Congress to appropriate the funds, he's going to just take the money out of the military budget. How many people? Millions, writes the Times. And not just immigrants. Trump is planning on sending his enemies to these camps, too. And is he going to get around Congress? Well, he did when he used that same strategy to build the wall, taking money from military housing. I mean, both are unbothered by mass deaths. For Hitler, it was the deaths in his concentration camps at first. For Trump, it was when he and Jared Kushner learned on April 7th, 2020, that black people were dying of COVID at twice the rate of white people. And that was the week that he said, okay, time to get back to work, which led to 500,000 unnecessary deaths. Jared Kushner called that, by the way, an effective political strategy. Blame it on the blue state Democratic governors. You know, this is just outside of creating the death camps, which Trump has not proposed. Of course, Hitler never publicly proposed creating the death camps either. In fact, he tried to hide them. He put them in countries outside of Germany, so he could after the fact, he could say, oh, I didn't do that, you know. Belsen or Bergen-Belsen or whatever it is in Holland. Auschwitz is in Poland. This is not Germany. This is not me. That was his strategy. None of the death camps are actually inside Germany proper.
To create a vertical sequence for Instagram Reels
Trump is not talking about creating death camps. George W. Bush didn't talk about, creating black sites where he could torture people to death, but he did it in Afghanistan and Iraq.